Hello, my name is Roy Todd. I'm the lead pastor of the Junction Church, and just want you guys to know that we're really praying for you in this season and believing that you know the grace of God and the peace of God as you lead people through this incredibly challenging time. If there is any passage from the Bible that has become an anthem in my heart in this season, then it's got to be Psalm 121. And the psalmist says, I will lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? And then he gives the answer. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. What's interesting about this psalm is that the psalmist is not actually talking to God. He's talking to himself. And as much as it's important that we do talk to God in a season like this, of course that's important, but self-talk really matters as well. How we speak to ourselves in the middle of all this is very, very important. Maybe when the psalmist wrote that particular psalm, maybe when he awoke that morning, he did not feel like lifting his eyes above the hills. But nevertheless, he begins with those two words, I will lift up my eyes above the hills. In other words, irrespective of whether I feel like it or not, irrespective of my questions, irrespective of the concerns that I've got going on, I am not going to look down, but I'm going to look up. I think posture means a lot in this season. Something about looking up. I will look up. And a better translation, by the way, is not so much I will lift up my eyes to the hills. A better translation is I will lift up my eyes above the hills. Where does my help come from? And that's a great question for every leader to think about. Where does my help come from? Psalmist already knows the answer to the question because he gives it in the next sentence, but he asks the question anyway. I think there are some questions that are good to ask ourselves repeatedly, even though technically we know the answer, but there's something about verbally expressing answers to questions which we know, because that somehow embeds truth in our spirits. Where does my help come from? Where does your help come from? In other words, where are you rooting your expectation in this season? Are we rooting our expectation in systems, in the government? Well, the challenge with what we're dealing with at the moment is that it's a pandemic. It's virtually uncontrollable by government and systems. So if ever the truth of that question or the truth of the answer to that question was relevant, then it's relevant today. Where does our help come from? And then the psalmist gives the answer. And the answer is very, very interesting that he gives. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He focuses on God's creative genius. And I think that that's got to be significant in a season like this as well. That, sometimes when you're at a loss and you don't have answers to questions, etc., God has this incredible ability to create streams in the desert. And he has this incredible ability to create answers to our deepest questions. So my encouragement to you today is to do what the psalmist encourages us to do. Lift up your eyes. Look above the hills. Where does your help come from? It comes from the Lord, the maker, the creator genius of the heavens and the earth. He's the one we are serving, and he is the one who is not only going to help us through this season, but I believe that he's going to fulfill some purpose that he has got in the midst of all this. And I believe that with all my heart. I want to pray for you and your church and your family, that you will do exactly and know exactly what the psalmist knew in Psalm 121. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for all the incredible leaders who are doing an amazing job right now, leading people through this challenging time. And I pray that even as leaders, we will take up the challenge of Psalm 121, whether we feel it or not. Help us to lift up our eyes above our circumstances, above the mountain that is in our way. Help us to lift up our eyes above that mountain, because you are our help and you are here to answer us. May we know your grace like never before. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Love you guys loads. Praying much for you.